Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. Today, we're going to talk to CCP Rise about EVE Online's Chaos era, as well as these new changes that have been proposed to the Cynosural Fields. Cynos, we call them. But first, I want to welcome our panelists. How's it going, Carneros?
Good morning. It's going great. Thank you.
And we're missing, at least today, we brought in Brisc. Rubal, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and Matterall, it makes me laugh that we know this is Talking in Stations because you're already mispronouncing words.
Okay.
Amen.
All right. How's it going, Rise? CCP Rise is a developer for EVE Online, and he is with us today to talk about Cynosural Fields. Did I get it right that time?
Yeah.
It's going pretty good. It's exciting times. Yeah.
You know, Rise, you've only been on the show like 2, maybe 3 times, and we always have really bad beginnings when you're here. And I don't think it's pressure because he's such a laid back guy. So I don't know what's going on. It's a little bit of a Rise hex.
Oh, wow. Sorry about that.
It's okay because we always have a great show afterwards. So
maybe I can join late or something next time.
Yeah, totally. Bring you in halfway. Okay, well, let's go over some news items real quick. I'm just going to run through these. Summer vacations are over at CCP, so I guess the non-sheep, or what is it, just sheep herding season is over. And so devs are back, so probably there'll be a lot more activity at CCP itself. Cyno changes have been announced that we're going to talk about today for September release, so keep in mind these are for September. We have changes also, I believe, for September are changes to Ventures and Faction War Plexus, which would be interesting. Oh, this is something you could talk about too, since your team designs the Triglavian stuff. Triglavian Recon Demovics have begun appearing in high-sec space and killing Capsuleers. So that has to do with invasions, probably. And last but not least, at the end of this visual show, you will see the second Haitian test that they do. That's the Haitian engine for EVE Online. It's called Aether Wars, and it happens right after this program if you're watching. All right, so let's again
Thank
welcome.
you for that short news brief.
We got to get someone else to do that. All right, questions for CCP Rise. Let's start. Carneros, can you do the first one?
Yeah. Well, first of all, welcome to the show. It's great to have you again.
Well, thank you.
Having you here. So now, I know this, but tell our listeners, how many years have you worked for CCP Games now?
I just passed 6 years.
Mazel tov. 6 years is great.
I know. I'm more than halfway to a sword, baby. Almost there.
A sword, baby.
I know. At 10 years, you get a sword. It's gorgeous. Yeah. It's real. It's fantastic. It's something you want. Everyone wants one of these.
I don't get why
it's offering an option to get something other than a sword. I don't remember what it is, but it's like, what are they thinking? Who's going to not take a sword?
Yeah, who's going to not take the sword? The sword wall.
Well, you know
awesome.
what? It's probably a Viking thing, though, right?
The sword or the alternative? The sword is a Viking thing for sure.
Yeah, the sword. Yeah. Otherwise, why isn't it a laser gun?
Because those aren't real metal, probably.
This is a real sword, not a real laser gun.
No, those swords, I mean, we were nice enough. Loki was willing to let us see one of the swords out there. And these are like real Albion swords. They're like, I mean, they could hurt you. They're pretty cool. You sharpen that thing up, it's going to work pretty well. So I was excited. Those swords are awesome.
Well, congratulations if you're halfway there. That's awesome.
Thanks.
And hopefully this interview will not make it less likely that you make it. So we got to be.
Yeah.
Also,
nice hopefully the Cyno change also doesn't make it less likely that I make it.
We'll try to get you to your sword.
Yeah.
So
can we jump right in on the change on asking about the Cyno changes?
Yeah, go for it.
So I guess obviously the Cyno change is a big deal, and I think for those of us who are listening, obviously you're aware that starting in the September release, Cynos will only be able to be fitted on Recon ships and Black Ops battleships, and that's a major change to the game. And I'm trying to, I guess one of the big questions we've been hearing from a lot of people is, what's the design goal with this change? what are you guys hoping to, what kind of behavior are you hoping to alter by making a change this big?
Yeah, so there's a few different pieces to it. I've actually been thinking about the best way to talk about this because it's definitely involves it has goals coming from a few different directions. One of them that's actually really important is just that Cynos on their own have been in this really inflexible place where we don't have usual levers to balance them, and they're sort of separate from the way balance works in a lot of other areas. Like if you think of other really powerful abilities that influence large scale fights, influence small scale fights, something like Dictor bubbles, for instance, they're class confined, they're expensive, they have like a clear set of levers and trade-offs that we can use to find a good place for them in balance. Cynos don't have that. Cynos have just been, for some reason, even though it's one of the most powerful abilities we could give a ship, they have complete free reign to use whatever cost risk they want and whatever survivability and sort of tactical application you want. So things like using interceptors is possible. Things using Titans or Fax, which can't be killed, is possible. And that's just super problematic. I've been talking with people at player events or internally for years and years about how this is an issue. So that's one thing, is just get them into a sensible place that looks like how we have other powerful abilities in the game balanced. That's a big goal. Second thing, which is something we talked about more in the post, is that part of Chaos Era and part of the current strategy is just be more disruptive, especially for super cap umbrellas, especially for kind of capital gameplay in general, like make it harder, make it give better like risk reward trade-offs, make it more dynamic. And Cynos are a huge piece of that, and there could have been tons of options for that goal on its own. That's a big thing I'm seeing in feedback, is like if you just wanted to hit the response time for capitals to PvEers, there would have been other alternatives, and that's actually totally true, and we considered a lot of those. But then the last goal, or the last big area of goal, is what Hilmar talked about with you guys a ton last time when he was on here. And I'm just going to take the opportunity to read his direct quote, which is, "We want you on your toes. We want you to feel like the blanket's being pulled out from under your feet every single week. Your heart rate's going up. You need to take stress medicine to keep focused." And while that didn't on its own drive, like that's not why we made a change to Cynos, but that's why we chose a really extreme solution, is that the sort of overall strategic goal right now is to lean towards bigger changes, lean towards more disruption. And so kind of with all those combined, we end up with this change. And as far as behavior we expect to change, that's kind of a whole nother complicated question. There's parts of it that are probably pretty easy to anticipate. The simplest one is that we don't want work walls to be able to Cyno freely ship a fleet in to defend them anytime they're attacked. Pretty obvious that won't be possible now. You'll either have to have an alt there, which is vulnerable to being killed, or a friend. Hopefully not an alt. So that behavior definitely changes. But when you start talking about how escalations work or how logistics work, it's much harder to say exactly what will happen or what we expect or want. I think mostly we want a shifting meta where people have to solve these problems and where we have new things we have to figure out and fix afterwards.
Yeah, I just want to say that was one of my favorite quotes from Hilmar for that interview. But, and I'm sure it was a big hit with other people too. If you look at Falcon's face, starts cracking up when he says it. But
yeah, I put it at the top of a document I made afterwards internally. It's like now my slogan for everything I'm working on.
Stress medicine.
Yeah.
But one of the things you just said, it sings out to me, is that you guys are aware of these powerful security situations with these super capital umbrellas, and you want to disrupt them.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that goal on its own is also complicated. It has a lot of components. I think it started like we really were a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, especially focused on that because of the economic effects, because the ISK faucet and resource faucet was getting completely out of control. And so it like needed intervention basically. And now
you're no longer tracking those as your main KPIs for your changes?
Definitely still tracking as KPIs, but definitely out of the woods when it comes to the sort of scary faucet situation we were in. Should be pretty easy probably for you guys to see that the amount of PvE going on in all forms has gone down a lot in nullsec, and with the market tax on top of that, we're completely out of the woods in terms of faucet. And I think actually before long, I mean, especially with this change, we're going to be looking at where to tune rewards back up to make sure that it's worth it for people to be out gathering resources and shooting rats, because we're going to be in a deficit pretty soon probably. And that's great. That's actually, I mean, if we let it sit, it'd be very bad, but it's a good place for us to be. A lot of the time we're really hamstrung in dev by not being able to give out rewards because we have faucet issues. So for instance, when we made the Abyss, we really tried to make all or the majority of the rewards come from new items rather than add to existing faucets, because that's so problematic economically. But if we're in a deficit, we have free rewards to give away. And so we can look at interesting ways to make it more valuable to be out there, you know, making money in nullsec or other places.
There's no longer an economic argument for doing these changes, is what I would tell my members.
That's a soundbite.
They're making the changes completely for other reasons now. They've achieved their economic goals. It's something else. We don't know what it is, and we don't know what KPIs they're tracking, but it's something else.
I would say that a lot of this change is still driven from the same conversations and starting point that had a lot to do with the economic issues. So, you know, we say, okay, we have faucet issues and botting issues. What can we do to try and improve that situation? And then the timeline for each of the potential solutions is different. So this is still definitely hooked to that conversation. But as we're closing off a bunch of those, efforts, now we're in a place where what we're looking at next, where we're going from here, is not going to be nearly as focused on the economic part, at least not on the out of control faucet part.
Well, here's a different scenario. I could call a fleet tonight. When I get to a safe moment in the game, I could stop and call a fleet. And I'll make a decision on if I call a subcap fleet or a cap fleet. And I will get different people who show up depending on which one I call. Because some of my pilots just really prefer flying caps.
Sure.
And those people, and we're just talking PvP. This has nothing to do with super cap umbrellas or PvE or anything. Those people feel like their gameplay got nerfed with this Cyno change. They're going to have fewer opportunities to go and do things. Now, a lot of it's psychological, but they feel like you're trying to drive them to fly subcaps, like in small gangs and low sec, like a mythical past. Is there a stylistic change we're trying to push toward?
No, not at least not that strict of one. We're definitely not trying to just say we'd rather people were flying, like being in cute small gangs, and so we're, you know, intentionally trampling on capital gameplay. Yeah, so I think if, for instance, if what you're saying is true, if we saw capital activity overall, especially like actual capital fights, you know, not I mean, it's tough because there's so much overlap. Like the umbrella issues, the defending PvE issues, those are all going to show up and overlap in any of our measuring with the type of fights you're talking about wanting. And so it'll be tough to tease them apart. But if we could say for sure, okay, the type of fights you're talking about have gone down, like that kind of capital activity is suffering, I think we would be trying to make a follow-up change to bring it back up. Like we would love to have more capital fights. I mean, that's something I've seen a lot of people say, that, you know, this is going to hurt the chance of large escalations, hurt the chance of big brawls, and that those are really important both for our, you know, marketing and attention for the game, and also for the enjoyment of people in the game. And we would agree. I think we want those fights. And if this has like a massively negative effect on that kind of activity, that's a problem, and we'll have to follow up.
Real quick, how long was the economic problem How long was that faucet open?
I mean, it's very gradual. I actually have. Oh shoot, I lost it. I had a graph up here. Oh, here it is. So we hit a really big peak, like around like this spring. And before that, it had been creeping up really slowly for quite a while. Like I'm looking at 3 years, and there's probably like an overall 40 to 50% increase over that 3 years leading up to this spring that happens pretty gradually. And so that was kind of like, that's when it, like around, I guess, fall of last year, like around October, November, is when it really got to a point that felt pretty unsustainable. And we started talking about what to do about it. And then it kind of, peaked out in the spring, and then has taken a massive nosedive since then.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's not the idea that you can create advanced gameplay for yourself and it be lucrative for you. It's that when everybody else does the same thing you're doing, when everybody's doing it, that's when you guys have to intervene.
Well, and under the new, the kind of strategic directive Hilmar is talking about, when it's comfortable, when it's incredibly low effort, to the point of being passive, like when botting is completely rampant because it's so consistent and predictable, that's a big problem. We would, I think we would want to work to a place where you have to pay a lot of attention. You have to be active in what you're doing. You have to make real risks to, get that kind of return.
So a lot of us have thought for a while, and I'm glad that you were talking about this, that the faucets were out of control. Now you guys think you've solved the faucet problem. So does that mean that blackout and things like that are going to be permanent? Is that going to be, because it seems like the blackout is the main driver behind the S faucet reduction, the PVE reduction. Is that an argument to make it permanent?
Right now it's definitely true that it's a huge part of it. I don't think it's the whole solution. Actually, without bringing up the graph and trying to do some PowerPoint, the capital, like application nerfs, the carrier nerfs, the NSA change, that stuff, which happened in spring, started this trend really strongly before blackout hit. Like, we lost kind of half of carrier and super carrier ratting income before blackout just because of those balance changes. And then the VNI change on top of that, which just kicked the VNI out of PvE. It's been replaced by Myrmidons and Helas and whatever, but the rate is not as high. So it's not like we need blackout to keep the faucet issue out of the picture. And I think whether or not blackout stays is much more about the kind of new experience. You hear it's obviously polarizing. You hear both sides. People are, some of them like, this is miserable. We're not, my corpse dead because nobody's doing anything because of blackout. And other people are saying they're having a great time. There's more small opportunities. There's more hunting opportunities. And we need to do good analytics on that, try to figure out how that balances out. And then I think that will determine whether or not blackout sticks, not the faucet part.
And getting back to something else we talked about on the Cyno issue, one of the things you mentioned was that you wanted to make it harder for the supercap umbrella groups to be able to do what they're doing. Do you think that this change mostly impacts the large groups or the smaller groups?
I think that's a really tough question. I think we know from lots of past changes, I think it's pretty obvious from feedback from this, that the big organized groups are going to handle change better than small groups. It's just with more resources, more expertise, more internal support, they're just always going to adapt better. And that's a huge challenge for us. When you talk about really small groups or groups with basically groups that don't depend on caps very much, I think it's really hard to make the argument that this is better for big groups than small groups because it makes caps much harder to use. And if you're a smaller roaming group, I was listening last night to Less Than 10 podcast, and they're talking about roaming in 4-man Drekavac fleets with no capital backup. For them, this is much better than it is for the big group. that they're attacking, because this is just giving them options to counter what's going on in the big group with their capitals. But as you work your way up the scale, if you get to mid-sized groups that are trying to do logistics on a shoestring to get things moved, or are just have like less characters available to get Cynos active, it's definitely going to be much harder for them to adjust than the big groups.
So who do you think is going to be the collateral damage in this change then? I mean, there's obviously going to be...
I'm not saying anything about collateral damage for you, Brisc.
I had to bring that up this time. I had to bring that up anyway.
But actually, the real collateral damage is like I was saying in the post, is jump freighters and kind of the logistics piece of it. And we're not, I think, making it harder to do logistics and move things around is very chaos era-y. I don't think it's against our goals for it to be more complicated to move things. Having risk-free teleportation of goods from nullsec to Empire is probably not something we would want in like ideal world. But also that's not really what we're trying to do with this change. So in a way it is collateral damage. In a way it is like the part that we're affecting more than we would want to, I guess, or than is described by the actual goals of the change. So that's why we're compensating a bit by trying to find other options. And we might make more adjustments to that after feedback.
And I think one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people is a concern of generally that, making something more complicated doesn't mean making it more inconvenient. And some of these changes may seem to be more inconvenience than anything. It's going to cost a little bit more. It's going to take a little bit more time to train an alt. It's going to require a little bit more of this. But in the end, you're still going to be able to do what you did before. It's just going to take an extra step.
In some cases, I buy that, in the example of jump freighters or other logistics, that's totally true. Move ops, totally true. But for the combat scenarios, that I don't think that's true at all. Now, responding to a tackled ratting carrier is not just like more bureaucracy. It's much more difficult. It's going to take like more time. The sort of strategic implications are totally different. Where do you put the Cyno to make sure that the Recon doesn't get killed? How does the group attacking you position bubbles to make sure stuff coming in from gates doesn't get there as fast? Like, that's not just inconvenience. That's like actually a very different combat dynamic. But in other cases, you're totally right. If you're just trying to move a bunch of stuff, yeah, there's just a higher barrier, I guess. There is more risk. I mean, throwaway rookie frig Cyno ships is silly, and at least having to put something on the line makes a lot of sense. And even though it is just added cost, that cost is relevant.
Okay, statistics that you're tracking. If tomorrow morning when you wake up, what is the first stat you're going to look at? What is the stat that you're currently most concerned about changing in Eve right now? Concerned about it changing or concerned about you changing it? Either one.
Reddit upvotes.
No, seriously.
No, I think
he's totally serious.
For a long time, we have been very laser focused on activity. How many people are logging in, both monthly, daily? That's why you're seeing things like login campaigns and new player work. We're just want more players. That is always the most foundational metric. With changes, with the sort of chaos era type changes, I think it's the timeline's really interesting to talk about, because like tomorrow, I would expect that the stat that changes the most compared to normal is unsubs, because probably some section of people are pretty unhappy and they'll go bye-bye. But it won't be a ton. But the point is that the short term may not see, especially since the change isn't even here, it's not even coming until September. When we see that hopeful uptick in activity, it's going to be somewhere down the line. So we have to watch it for a while and look at, we're looking at stuff like with Blackout, how do stats like churn, reacquisition, how are those things looking, and how are they looking across different sections of the player base? Like, how are they looking in certain regions over other regions? How are they looking in certain alliances over other alliances, certain security bands, and we're kind of in the middle of digging into all that analytics. But at the super top level, we just want people in the game. That's definitely the key metric.
Is there a concern that making so many major changes to the game so close to it in time to each other, that's going to have a negative impact? Have you guys talked about that internally, about stretching things out a little bit more? Because it seems like this is coming after the drifters, and we go to blackout, then we get the Cyno changes with all the other stuff going on. It's a lot of massive upheaval in a very short amount of time for players to process.
Pedal to the metal is the attitude right now. The strategic goal at the moment is make big, brave changes back to back to back, keep things moving. And the hypothesis is that people are bored, that we need to get back to dramatic shifts because it's a lot more engaging, and people will be a lot more excited to come in and figure things out. Whether or not that's true, we'll have to see. But it's definitely seems true that we've been in a pretty conservative stance for quite a while now, and that both, player discussion and our internal discussion has gotten to a point where like it feels too static, it feels too slow, and so we're gonna keep pushing stuff. I don't know if we'll keep the same drama and pace as Blackout and the Cyno changes, but that's the idea. Hopefully we will.
You were hearing it on both sides. You were hearing it from players like things are too stagnant, and you guys were discussing it yourself like things are too stagnant. Was there a moment where you said, that's our sign that we've been looking for? Because I think it might have been skill you taking off, but that's from a player perspective.
I don't have like a moment that sticks out, no.
The next question is something that's been put out there, that you guys are doing all this crazy stuff. You're shaking up the game in order to make money, because now people have to buy some skill injectors in order to get into these new higher skilled Cyno alts. Is this just like, Hilmar trying to make his quarterly bonus?
Man, I've heard that too, and it kind of blows my mind. It's like, if you needed to generate a whole bunch of extra money off of Eve really fast, I think doing something like turning off local would be really a crazy thing to do. It's like, from my perspective, it's the opposite of money grabby. It's saying we're willing to sacrifice some short-term sentiment, monetization, whatever, because we trust that long-term this is good. It is an experiment in some sense, and hopefully we have short-term learnings off it we can act from. But to me, the strategic position right now feels totally opposite to that. We're saying, rather than be safe and protect the every last comfortable player we have right now, we think we are going to get more value by doing something interesting, even though it's risky. And I think if we were and it's a little scary to say, because who knows, maybe someday it'll look a lot more like this for some reason or another. But if we wanted to just extract short-term gains, there are much more vicious ways we could do it than a change to Cyno skill requirements that's trainable by the time the release hits. I can think of some. I probably just won't say them in case for some reason we do them someday. But
you'll get misquoted. But it does remind me of a time when CCP, and this goes back to 2005, there was this Great Heist. It was written about PC Gamer. It was called Murder Incorporated. It's very well known. And the community was outraged that somebody could infiltrate a corporation and bring it down from the inside and just devastate it. And CCP at the time said, we're not going to do anything about this. We're not judges. This is what you guys do to each other. We're just maintaining the world. And that brought in a whole crop of new players who were like, wow, this fantastical world where you can be really treacherous to people. It was a gamble.
Sure. Yeah.
This reminds me of that.
Yeah. And actually, that's another area where I think we, I don't know how much Hilmar talked about this last week. I don't remember. But we've moved away from, well, actually, I think players have moved away. Players have done such a good job over the last 15 years working out how to mitigate trust as an important commodity in Eve. In those old days, it felt very like social sandboxy, and now it feels more like dealing with HR departments, and and that's mostly on players. I think that just the sophistication of player social organization has gotten to the point where that kind of old, like, I tricked you, and I mean, it happens a little bit, but not as much. And I think we would part of chaos era, part of trying to like get back to things being challenging and scary and deep is about rebuilding some systems that reward trust.
But you do realize the massive connection between onboarding brand new players and having them stick with the game and larger organizations being able to trust them to some degree?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's and it's that's a hard trade-off. You know, we're talking. Actually, I suppose it's a question. I feel like someone asked yesterday when I was talking with folks, but you know, how do we deal with the fact that trying to make changes that disrupt or you know, cause issues for big alliances potentially has negative fallout for new player onboarding. And I think that we're just looking at this trade-off where, yes, these organizations are super powerful for onboarding, but we're not going to get the people interested in coming in if the game isn't lively and, you know, if there isn't stuff happening to get people excited about being here and get the people in the alliances online and active, then it doesn't matter that they're incredibly organized and good at onboarding people. So we need to move back towards getting people excited both in the alliances and outside the game so that they're there in the first place, and then make sure that we're still doing stuff that, you know, rewards them for bringing those people in.
Brisc.
So back to, I hate to go back on the Cynos, but one of the legitimate concerns that I saw from folks about the Cyno changes, and I want to know if you guys had started thinking about this, was memorial Cyno fleets are a big common thing. When someone passes away, we do our little vigils, and lighting a Cyno is the way to do it. That's going to become infinitely more difficult to do now with these changes. Have you guys thought about anything to try to mitigate that or make it possible to still do that?
For sure. This was probably the most caught me the most off guard in the feedback yesterday. We didn't think about that, but it's super important to us. I was going to post about it yesterday, but decided to just wait until we have a plan. But we definitely want to address this. This is a really incredible thing that's emerged as a community tradition. We don't want to stop supporting that. So we're talking about what to do about it. Personally, I mean, you know, there's suggestions to do a dedicated sort of memorial Cyno module. I actually think that will feel a little more hollow than the way it works now. So we're also looking at things like, one of the other solutions we had for the jump freighter issues, the collateral damage issue, was to create a dedicated freight Cyno that has a different set of ships that can use it, maybe down to something cheap like in T1 Industrials. And if we just put that in instead of using the covert Cyno solution, then that would give a super accessible low skill Cyno that people could still use. So we'll figure something out. I think worst case scenario, it would be like in October instead of September, but probably we can do it at the same time, and we definitely want to. It would be very sad to see that tradition go away.
Well, you should just make some kind of a firework mechanic instead of a firework.
Yeah, but there's so much, I don't know, there's so much history with it, for one. Lighting up the map is a really cool part of it. It feels, I think everything about it feels like a vigil. It feels like a candle. You know, it's a beacon you can see. It shows up on the map.
Dark space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the map. I hadn't done.
It fits. It's really cool the way it is now, the way people are using it. So doing something like a firework launcher, or something, you know, even if it was really well done, the art for it and whatever, I think it would still not have the same resonance that the current Cyno thing does.
Now, one question that I have to ask, because it always comes up whenever you guys are making changes trying to address certain issues, super cap proliferation or this or that or the other thing. And if you saw Reddit today, Stain Guy made a pretty interesting post where he noted that of all the major nerfs when it comes to Rorquals, when it comes to the anomaly changes and the super ratting changes and the VNI changes and trying to fix the faucets and everything, all of that basically is trying to address a meta that was created by skill injectors. So given all these changes and everything that's had to happen, largely as a result of the ability of players to create alts very quickly and easily and skill them into specific roles, do you still think that adding skill injectors to the game was a good idea?
Yes. Yeah, it is important for our business. There's no doubt about that. But also all the problems, I still feel really good about the fact that the skill points are actually trained rather than being generated. We had a little slip up there a bit ago with the starter packs, but for the most part, we're still doing well on that. And any of the things that he's talking about would happen over time without skill injectors. Like, I think we do have to account for the fact that when there's shifts in meta, they can happen a lot faster. And especially for wealthy groups, that pivot can happen really quick, which can be a strategic advantage, and we should be mindful of that. But it's not like, I don't even know how something like the VNI change is relevant, but if there's problems with something about combat or PvE or whatever, there are problems whether or not people have to wait to train or they can get the skills quickly with skill injectors. I think that still feels completely fine. And we have actually tried to, we're talking about with this change whether or not it's worth turning the covert signer requirement from 5 down to 4. But even if we leave it at 5, which I would feel fine about, I think the amount of training is pretty small and can be done before the release. It's very, very standard for us to change skill requirements and add new skills as we add new content or make changes. And I think that will just continue. And the benefits of skill injectors, both for the business and for letting people catch up, giving people an actual path into doing the things they want faster by being more active, I think all of that still stands. So we still feel pretty good about it.
And I was thinking about this change. It's not very chaotic. I mean, you're giving everybody warning instead of pulling the rug out from under. What's going on there?
Yeah, it did. The big boss man was a little disappointed that we warned people. Scope video 2 days before the change would have fit a lot better with Chaos Era, but this was a big one. It felt a little too dramatic to spring on people with no warning, with no option to actually have Cyno characters available. I think that would have been extremely harsh. So
with these Cyno changes, this is a big deal. Is there anything that is not on the table right now? Is there anything you guys will not touch in Chaos Era?
I don't think there's anything that's not on the table, no.
Asset safety? You have an announcement to make?
I don't have an announcement to make, but it's not off the table.
Oh.
No, I think we're talking about everything. We're actually deliberately trying to dig real deep. There's a lot of things that we take for granted or the systems have so much history and momentum that we don't usually talk about something like this Cyno change. And I think a really awesome thing about this Case Era mentality is saying, okay, we could change mobile Cyno inhib balance. We could increase its range and survivability a bit. But if we really want to do something wild and I don't know, challenge something at a deeper level that's been established for a really long time, what would we do? And that's opening up a whole bunch of cool conversations about changes we could make. It's happening for lots of different parts of the game. I won't try and say what, but a simple one actually that's shown up in the community, like Olmeca, who's extremely divisive, of course, but his capital HP discussion being like, capitals break the rules. Like, balance works, every ship has about 2 times as much HP as the last class until you get to capitals, and then it has 10 times. Why? In the past, I don't think we would have taken that very seriously, but now we're like, yeah, that's a good question. Maybe we should just change that. And that's applying across the whole game. So we'll see what comes from that, but you can see from changes like Blackout and the Cyno change that kind of anything's fair game.
So as a designer, this must be pretty exciting for you then, because you get to question some of the fundamental pillars of what everybody has agreed on is normal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting. It's scary because people are used to these things and I don't know. I personally, I would really like if we found ways to challenge or basically to create some of these new experiences without always upending an existing experience. I think wormholes are such a cool example of that, where we have a fundamentally different in every way environment for people to try and figure out without having to throw out the one that they're used to using and they like. We haven't done much of that for a while. Things like Citadel, Sovry work, Wardeck rework, they are all creating new environments, but they're always doing it at the cost of something that some player group at least is comfortable with at the time. And I don't think that's a requirement. So the most exciting environment for me as a designer would be an actual blank slate, but at least that we're looking for that experience and asking the questions is definitely exciting.
One of the things you're famous for among the EVE community is module tiericide and ship tiericide, which for observers who don't know this internal EVE slang, that's sort of taking a look at a group of related items and giving them each sort of a purpose and a reason and a relative strengths and weaknesses. So you have a choice when you go to fit something of that item type to your ship. I don't know if that's a fair description.
That's a great description.
Okay, thank you. What's the status of module tiericide these days? Are you still associated with it? Does your team think about that still?
I mean, the main status is that it's something we always are trying to find room to squeeze into roadmaps. It's often a good summer project when half the teams are there and there's some designers with available time for content adjustments, but not a lot of bandwidth for like bigger changes. The reality is there was a time when it was a really big focus. We got a lot of it done. The impact from those changes is super low now, and we're just really focused on doing things that people really feel. So it often ends up, just a little bit down on the list, and so it isn't showing up in patch notes as often as it used to. But ideally, we definitely finish that someday. One nice thing is as we add modules, they're always added under the module tiericide kind of thinking. So we're at least not accumulating extra debt of module groups that don't make any sense, but there's still some that we need to go back and do. We talked about doing a bunch of them this summer, and then Chaos Era and NPE focuses shifted around, and so it didn't happen. But yeah, it's there always.
So, just because you're the balance guy and talking about tiericide, are you guys still working at the same pace on balance changes now, or is the chaos thing blown everything off the front page?
It's always changing. I'm gonna stop going to Vegas and telling people that this is our new balance pace. I've done that I think the last 3 years. All of them I've come and said. I think it's actually specifically because we end up in Vegas right after CSM Summit, and I feel like CSM often helps push balance priority up sort of in the scheme of all the things we're doing. And so we come out of CSM time being like excited about it, and then we do a bunch of work, and then by the time we get to like this time of year, it's starting to slow down again. It's just always changing. It just depends. Right now, as the guys were saying to you last week, around 70% of our overall dev effort is focused on early game in one way or another. Sometimes that might actually include balance, but most work right now needs to be at least in some way influencing early retention, which puts like veteran balance, something like a Black Ops class rework or Navy ship balance, much lower on the list than it would have been, I don't know, 6 months ago or something when I was talking about it last. And that's just always shifting depending on what the strategic need is. Chaos Era discussion has put certain types of balance like PvE balance, cap and super cap balance very much on the table for discussion. So it kind of just depends on which part of it you're looking at.
Well, that brings me to, I have a couple just random quick balance questions that folks had asked for us to talk about. And one of them was, in terms of Black Ops, are you guys planning on any other changes anytime soon other than the Cyno changes?
I mean, the feedback I think is pretty on about the Cyno duration bonus. We talking about making some little tweaks there so that it's not locked into the 10 minutes or whatever it is for the normal Cynos now that they can fit those. There's definitely no plan for any broader rework. I know that one of the big concerns that's showing up kind of as a result of the Cyno change, but I don't feel like is actually super tied to it, is bomber balance and Covop's attack fleets and just kind of unengageable, jump destroyers and bomber compositions. So that's something I'm paying a lot more attention to right now, and maybe we'll need adjustments for that at some point, but that's not on
You're scaring
like a roadmap.
You're scaring me that my Stuka fleets are going away.
Well, that's one of the big concerns. The bombers are overpowered right now. So are boosters. Especially in the new meta.
Yep.
So,
and that's
on the Cyno Black Ops thing, one of the criticisms that I saw, and I think this is pretty legit, is unless there are some changes to the way the Cynos work on Black Ops, why would you ever use a Black Ops instead of a Force Recon? I mean, you're putting a billion plus ship out there to get blown up, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible to make them tankier, which is pretty valuable. And it's actually, that's the point that's pushed us away from adding classes like Tech 3 cruisers or command ships or something, because you could get such tanky platforms for them, which would work against the purpose a little bit. But the duration issue is definitely a thing. So we're talking about giving a bonus there or changing the base duration on Cynos so that you don't have to be pinned down for so long to light one. And there may be other changes after, once we see how things actually work out. If no one's ever using Black Ops or there's a big problem with recons, we can add classes or make adjustments to the ships that can use them.
Okay, well, this question was brought to my attention by Vince Draken from Northern Coalition. He says T3s are considered covert and they have relevant subsystems, so why wouldn't they be a part of this process of being able to light a Cyno?
Yeah, pretty much what I just said. I mean, we talked about it. They're substantially tankier, which is, maybe we need that, but at least to start with, that sounds like it works against what we're going for a little bit. The other kind of weirdness is that would we put the regular Cyno just on the class, like as a class restriction, so then you could use it without the covert sub, and then you can fit covert when you have the subsystem, or do we put the Cyno on the, it would make the sort of function as a Cyno platform a little more confusing and awkward. I don't think that's a huge problem. It's more the tankiness that's causing us not to do it right away. But I think it would be a good candidate. Yeah.
Is it also possibly the cloaking nullified aspect of it? Because I think one of the other concerns is if we're not going to be able to use interceptors anymore, then at least gate camps have a chance to keep a Cyno from getting into the system. But if you put them on a T3C that's cloaky, you're never going to catch them. Yeah,
for sure.
Or other people were wondering, why just the Force Recons and not the Combat Recons? Is that because, I mean, it's not because people were using the Combat Recon a lot and the Force Recon not at all. I mean,
no, it's not because of that.
D-scan thing?
Yeah, the D-scan thing's kind of weird. I think that, I don't know, I think the reason naturally we just picked Black Ops and Recons to start with is because they're Cyno-themed ships. Like, they already have bonuses. They already have that as sort of a flavor for the ship, so it just felt like a natural fit. And then whether or not to add Combat Recons felt like, are we getting something good out of having them be D-scan immune? And is that, does that fit, or would another, if we're going to add another class, what would it be? And I think if we were going to add another class, it would be because there needed to be a slightly more tanky option. And so then we'd be looking, I don't know if that would be Hicks or strategic cruisers or what, but Combat Recons would just be sort of a weird side grade, I guess, and with a little strangeness because of the D-scan immunity. Yeah, I don't know.
I think Hicks would make sense. I think I've seen a couple people bring that up, and I think that probably makes the most sense. But that's up for you guys to decide.
You mentioned earlier you've been getting feedback, right? The thread's already up to 300 posts,
2,500 comments or something between Reddit and Evo.
Whoa! And that's interesting. Do you check out Reddit for comments? I mean, where do you go look for feedback?
I mean,
where can people post to get in front of your eyes?
I mean, everyone looks at Reddit. Everybody does. That's just
The
course you
sad
do.
truth.
I read through almost all of the Evo thread yesterday. It's probably, I read through the first 500 posts or something at least. Watch Tweet Fleet, and then there's a lot of more, I don't know, long form feedback. Like look at feedback from CSM as they're looking at what player everyone else is saying in their corps and their alliances and funneling that into us. That's a big channel. And then also there's former CSMs and, you know, other communities we're hooked into from either from being players or from past CSMs or past tournament commentators or whatever it is. And so we hear from those folks as well.
All right. And you're going to stay in Talking in Stations Discord, so that'll be another place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dish feedback.
Actually, yeah, that was a big part of my feedback session yesterday, talking to you guys and watching your chat.
I was going to say, it was really nice that you came in to kind of hang out, and it just turned into Q&A. And by the time we knew it, had 60 people in voice comms throwing questions at you. And I try to keep it informal.
Get the heck out of there.
Yeah. I was like, he's just coming to test his mic, guys. Give him a break.
No, it's fun. It's actually, if there weren't, you know, if it wasn't so complicated to do that because of like favoring one community or having it get so big that it's hard to manage, it'd be fun to do that more often. It really feels nice. Like the, you know, live event roundtables and stuff are a really, really great way to actually talk to people instead of having to do it all through snarky posts online.
Well, let's do more of that, because you could see people were very cordial yesterday.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised nobody was yelling at you. That was a change. I was surprised.
It's super rare that people use their actual voices to be mean. Once in a while, but I think most of them just stayed muted.
All right. So those are the Cyno changes that have come up. There are significant changes to an underlying system in this game. CCP Rise is out front on this one. Are you like the last CCPer dev that is out front on things that everybody else get burned so bad they're not coming out front
I love
anymore?
being out front. It's fun. No, I don't think people are, I think people are feeling kind of emboldened right now, actually. I don't know. It can be tiring, but someone's got to talk to people. And, you know, you had, I think your talk with Falcon and Hilmar last week is pretty awesome. Those guys are excited to be in front of people and talk about stuff too. We're not scared.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel that energy, or with with Hilmar and Falcon, even before the interview. You could just feel the energy coming off them, and I think it's
they're pumped.
Yeah, it's contagious.
It's fun. It's really good. It's really good for the, you know, Hilmar's had his like sort of duties and responsibilities are always shifting depending on what's going on with other projects and other studios within the company, and it's pretty exciting when he gets a chance to really dig into Eve. He's like a bit of a lunatic, but it's invigorating for everybody, I think, to have him here. Like, let's, you know, get going, do something awesome, shake things up. It sort of, gives everyone permission to get excited and go a little nuts, which is really refreshing.
Yeah, so this last part, if you look back, and this ties right into what you're saying, if you look back at EVE Online, the march to 200,000 players, you could just see it seemed like one big expansion after another. It almost felt like success after success after success. You had faction warfare come in, broken or not, and then you had wormholes come in. It just seemed like the world was expanding, and you guys were able to create this stuff. You were probably a player at that time, and a really, really famous player, and so you were part of all that.
And then it turned around when I joined.
Yeah, then you joined and it all went to no. But what happened was, it seemed like at a certain point you just ran out of gas and said, we got to fix things that are broken in the game, and we've got to like make it playable in certain ways. It just kind of feels like it went into a more, let's take care of this thing.
Totally. I think that's what happened. I think it wasn't running out of gas. It was realizing, I think, post Incarna, like if you look at Crucible, there was a huge, and, you know, Carneros is probably better in a way at talking about this than me, but there was a huge realization that there'd been this accumulation of debt. Like there's all this stuff that now, we've been piling exciting stuff into the game for years, but now it's all been sitting there being used without a lot of care. And
we probably need to explain that term, because that's an industry dev term, technical debt and design debt. It's making work for yourself for later of things that you're going to have to clean up or rewrite the code to be more expandable or scalable later, or because sometimes you end up having to take a shortcut here or there. Can you?
Yeah, it's like you're doing laundry and you just throw all the laundry on the bed because you need to get to it fast, and then you can't find anything later. Instead of taking the time to like fold up your stuff and put it away.
I mean, I've been playing some other games lately where this happens really fast and it's easy to experience. If you played like some Satisfactory or some Factorio or some Oxygen Not Included, you like so excited to build new rooms and get a new section set up, and then like, you know, a couple cycles later, you're like, oh, I really didn't put that in the right place, but now it's going to be so hard to move because there's other stuff in the way. But what had happened I think the tough thing for us is that there'd been all those years of building up that debt, and then we pivoted, did a bunch of cool work going back and cleaning things and being more janitorial, but then we settled into that as our job. Like, I think then that became just our operating mentality is more janitorial. And I think now what we're sort of, I think at least it feels to me like that's sort of the wake up call now is like, oh, we're just kind of being caretakers when actually we could be creative and exciting and, you know, get back to doing stuff that creates debt. Which
one of the things you guys did that was well, one of the things you guys did that was new, that created new debt that I think a lot of people are really happy about are the trig ships, and the Triglavian ships have been one of your babies. How do you feel right now about the utilization? Are they where you think they need to be, where you wanted them to be? What do you think?
I think they're way too good, and I'm surprised that we're getting away with it, sort of. Like, they're so strong. I mean, I was just looking yesterday, and I think Leshaks and Kikis are both like top 6 for damage by ship type in the game over the last few weeks or something. They're really, really strong, but it's pretty cool how they're set up in a way where it doesn't feel nasty. It doesn't feel super oppressive. I'm sure it does sometimes, but it's, you know, it's much healthier for being so powerful than a lot of past stuff that I've made. So something like the Orthrus, you know. So that feels pretty exciting. I'm really excited, like happy with where they are. Maybe we'll have to tone them down sometime, but I love that they're have a place and that they're not making everybody miserable. So yeah.
And I have to ask you this because I asked you this yesterday. Can we please get a Nurgle range buff? Just a little one. A little one.
Not a chance.
Oh, come on. I'll take the drones away. You can have the drones back. Just give me a range buff.
The ship's probably way too good as it is. You can keep your one small weakness. Be happy about it.
Well, I'm still top 10 all-time kills for the Nurgle, so I'm happy with it. But it's one of my favorite ships now.
I'm not on that list.
You need to get up there.
I know. I need to step it up.
Okay, so the Eve Invasion Tour is still continuing. And our next stop is August 23rd in Finland at someone's house. Is that not crazy? Are you going to go to Finland for this?
I'm not going to go to Finland, no.
Okay, good.
And
so,
I'm sort of thankful because I feel like I don't want to have to be a witness, you know, testifying or something because of being there. So.
Okay, question. I know it. Is there going to be a keynote? We're all expecting a keynote.
I don't know much about it.
Invasion stuff.
I don't know much about it. I was talking to Cognac is going to do a talk at G Fleet, which is coming up in just a few weeks as well. So I know about some plans for talking there, but I haven't heard what they're gonna. I heard there's going to be like a long live stream from the Finland event. I don't know if that will count as a keynote, but I'm sure you'll hear something about EVE Online during that.
Good.
I'm keeping my expectations low, like a knocked over camera focusing on a sock on the rug.
It's probably a good idea.
Which live EVE events are you going to be at for the rest of the year, Rise?
Just Vegas for me.
Just Vegas, okay.
Yeah. Yep, had that new child this year, so taking it a little easier on event visits. But
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. But yeah, Vegas for sure.
You name her after your favorite ship?
Yeah, I named her Cynosural Field Generator, actually. We're very proud of little Cyno.
Baby Cyno.
Baby Cyno. Well, I thought you called her Sword because you said I had a baby sword.
Oh.
Or the other way around. Halfway to my sword, baby.
No, she's baby June.
Right. Congratulations. Okay, so we'll skip the father questions because we already did that all pre-show, but a lot of people are saying people are leaving. I should just say people say, yeah, I'm leaving, or friends are leaving, or whatever the game because, CCP is disrupting me too much. And then you also have people who are like, heck yeah, I'm coming back. I haven't played this game in like 10 years, but I'm coming back for this. Where are the numbers as far as people? Are you seeing any major shift back or forth?
I mean, we're still digging into that. I just saw today the start of like a much deeper set of analytics on this so that we can try and understand it better. It's always remarkable to me how stable Eve is. Almost without fail, when people are saying this kind of thing, it's completely invisible in metrics like the monthly active user count. Like there is, from Blackout, there is, if you drill down more, if you look at something like the amount of people jumping gates in nullsec, you can see a really stark drop, or at least you can see a drop. But whenever you move up to like people are leaving the game, it's almost impossible to tie it to anything we've done super recently, with the exceptions being usually the events and logging campaigns where we see really distinct spikes. But of course, that's always paired with marketing as well.
So even after the Rorqual changes, where everybody said they were unsubbing everything, you guys didn't see any spikes.
It's just a flat line, dude. You cannot see an exodus of Rorqual pilots in the monthly active user count or something like that. And in fact, like Hilmar was saying, it's been better than usual this summer by quite a bit, which is probably a lot to do with the login campaign strategy that we've had recently, which is pretty new. But if there was some big negative effect from the Rorqual changes in the spring or from the blackout recently, they're not obvious. We need to dig deeper. I was talking today with Fozzie about how there is clear differences in the way different regions or different alliances activity levels have changed, and so we need to work to like pick that apart, make sure that there isn't something like only people in Delve are still logging in and everywhere else they're not, but they're doing it enough to compensate, and so it looks flat.
Can you give us any details on that? On which areas? All right.
Sorry.
Just trying.
It is true that for the big PvE activity, like if you look at carrier adding or super carrier adding or mining, that like Delve is reacting better than like they're recovering faster, which isn't surprising. They have the organizational power and assets or whatever to make that happen more quickly. And that's definitely true.
But basically a flat line.
What? Yeah, basically, I mean, stable. It's not literally flat, but yeah, it's when you hear like, it's hard because it's spread out over so much experience. So there's other things like with Blackout, it's true for sure that Abyss PvE, high sec PvE, low sec activity in general has all gone up. So it may be completely true that the person in like a small to mid-sized nullsec group sees a lot less people logging in. They might be logging in and doing something else, or they might have switched styles, or people who are in that other style may have started logging in to compensate for them for some reason, like not specifically to compensate for them, but because their playstyle was boosted. So it's not, I definitely wouldn't say that the folks giving those anecdotes that they're seeing less activity are wrong. I'm sure they're right, but the overall line is very hard to move.
So if you guys notice like a decrease in nullsec activity paired alongside an increase in low sec and high sec activity, is just moving? Is that what you think's happening, or?
No, because it's not quite that simple. Like nullsec PvP has slightly gone up. If you look at kills or total damage done or something like that, the amount of activity in nullsec has gone up some. But if you look at mining and ratting, it's definitely gone down with kind of increases in high sec and low sec to make up for it. A lot of that's probably not people moving, it's just people using different characters, or not necessarily leaving the living space completely. But that's where we get to detail, which I'm not, we need to do more work to understand exactly what's happening, see if people are actually moving, and if they are, where they're moving from and where they're moving to. None of that is super clear right now.
All right. At this point, we're going to take a break so you guys can watch Aether wars that are happening right now. And we'll be back with a little bit more from CCP Rise.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Aether Wars live section of the stream.
Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, definitely. So what we have here is kind of the scenario that we have been presented with. So I don't know, shall I read the scenario and the objective and stuff like that?
Hold on, let's transition. We are now moving into Aether Wars presentation. This is a live demo. What you have been watching is CCP Rise interview, which was pre-recorded. We'll get back to that as soon as this demo is over. McLeod is set up on Aether Wars. We have some guests that'll talk about Aether Wars and more, because we don't know how much content is actually here. So McLeod's going to take us through what Aether Wars is and what we should be looking for.
Yeah, so Aether Wars basically it's a tech demo of server-side architecture that scales infinitely via the cloud. I wouldn't say that I am any kind of like expert on it whatsoever, but like I understand the sort of fundamentals of it. But essentially, it's CCP's wanting to check this out because they want to see the viability of it to basically be implemented into Eve server side, so basically when we have our massive fleet fights, it scales, but it basically scales with the amount of people that are playing, but doesn't actually severely impact the performance of the servers. So that's the idea. Obviously this time they've kind of presented us with a little bit more of a kind of like an interesting sort of gameplay experience rather than just being a complete tech demo. I'll go through the scenario if you want, like that's sure. Going on with this. So the scenario is a Garista pirate fleet has procured filaments loading into a pocket of abysmal dead space rich with clusters of highly valuable 0-point condensate. Making use of a narrow window in Triglavian patrols, the fleet rushes in for the grab. So basically, we're a group of Garistas, and we're trying to go in and we're trying to grab a bunch of 0-point condensate inside of an abyssal pocket, and hopefully, probably not get killed by Triglavians.
All right.
We have a bunch of ships. We have a bunch of cool ships. Gila. You can choose which ship you want to be.
Nice animation.
I know. Rattlesnake. Obviously, these are like sort of meant to be like holographic representations of it. Or we can go with the worm. So I don't know. Does anybody want to have a sort of?
Looks like a harpy to me.
Looks like a harpy, but it is a worm because it is a Garista ship. So shall we go with a worm?
Sure.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's do that.
It's like a one button and you're in.
Yep.
This is the abyssal art direction environment. What was that blue line? Was that you?
I don't know, but so this is the environment that we have at the moment. The ship controls are very much like an actual. I wouldn't say a flight sim, but like sort of like an arcadey flight sim, I guess.
Yeah. Are you using arrow keys or the WASD?
I'm using WASD, but like I'm also holding like a mouse button to move cameras and stuff like that. So as we're slowly getting ourselves into here. So there's a bunch of controls, but like the environment is definitely a whole lot better.
Whoa, look at that Gila go right by. Or Gila, since I'm Mexican, I'll say it right. Looks like these are player characters in here. So these are other players. You can tell by the way they fly, just like bats, totally random. So those are probably
some of those missiles flying around as well. Yeah.
Are missiles, yeah. And otherwise, it's an arena, it looks like, right? You have a mission, but do you know what you need to do to accomplish that? Or is... I think we're really just looking at...
yeah, well, the idea is to find some of this 0-point condensate. I'm not entirely certain where it comes from, or where to find it. Like that, I mean,
there are
some
right?
controls. Yeah, it's very Eve, definitely.
They drop you in, give you no instructions, and say, figure it out.
Press F to scan, and you'll see them on the rocks, and you can use R to mine them.
Terrific. That is the voice of Lux Seindir.
Those are trade secrets, Matterall. Don't tell anyone else.
He's joining us as part of the demonstration to tell you about what's going on in here. What are your impressions so far, Lux? You've been playing for just a few minutes.
Well, I had the server to myself for a while, so that was pretty fun.
You were in here before anybody, so it was quiet. All right, you found it. So it says there, you find yourself in frozen space, log out and log back in again. Huh? Oh, you must have died.
No. That's just like like what would be equivalent to a server-wide message.
Yeah,
I see.
There was a bug on the server side. So what happened is you spawn in and you just wouldn't move. And you just need to quickly refresh your game to unfreeze yourself.
And that is the voice of Sarah Patakane from Test, and he is helping us out as well as part of this.
Matterall, I'm going to need your assistance in order to actually,
Sure.
If there's anything going wrong with the stream, you need to let me know, because I don't see the stream.
Okay, I'll go look at it.
But I imagine it is perfectly fine. Just. Yeah. I would say go off the comments in chat, but sometimes the comments in chat are trolling us, or can be trolling us. Let's put it that way. I'm trying to see some kind of. Oh wow, all right. That's pretty cool.
As McLeod is navigating around trying to fulfill his mission of finding some condensates. What were they? Anyway, some material.
0-point condensates.
You can see there are other people in this game as well. The whole idea of this technology is to test out its viability as a server substitute, for instance, so that many Eve players can play at the same time without servers burning up and dying. And that's what this test is all about. It's the second test from, what's the group?
Hayden Interactive. Yeah, Hayden Interactive.
Thanks. It's a second test from that. They made one about 3 months back, and it looks like they put more environment into this one. The last one didn't have as much environment. And it's very interesting because I'm looking at the lighting, and you see how the light kind of follows the ship. Oh, you're getting blasted there. This is a PvP arena, so it's probably going to happen. You can see ship trails look a little bit different. Everything looks a little bit different, except the ship types. We're in a worm. You can see what looks like rattlesnakes out there. There's gilas out there, and there's probably other worms. Oh, yeah, we're getting smashed. Now, is there sound associated with it? I know people make that joke that Eve doesn't have sound, but it certainly does. Wow,
you guys hearing sound or not?
That was a good flyby right there. All right, so maybe the sound comes later.
So
there is sound. I need to sort that out, but.
So one of the guys from Hayden just put a statement out saying this whole thing you're seeing here is a single shard, similar to how Eve runs across the globe, which is running actually in the Azure data centers, which is an unusual choice. Most people would.
That looks actually pretty exciting right there, the way you escaped that fight. Nice piloting, McLeod. This is actually making Eve look like exciting. No, just kidding. A lot of Eve Online is played in your head. It's almost like reading sometimes, in that you're plotting long strategies, you're waiting for plans to come to fruition. Eve Online has not been known as an arcade game, but as you can see with this engine, it can become a lot more exciting to actually watch. It looks like a giant ink cloud there.
Yeah, you have to understand that, like, when it comes to sort of putting together something like a space sim, there's aspects of flying that becomes a lot more challenging for a server than Eve regularly would be, because, you know, much like sort of flying, dogfighting, stuff like that, you know, it's all about twitch reflexes and, you know, sort of that kind of thing. Response times and stuff, and Eve isn't really one of those games because the server works at a 1 hertz tick rate, whereas your usual FPS will run at least 30. So, you know, the stress on a server is 30 times less for for a server running Eve than it is for running, say, a regular FPS.
Well, until you get 6,000 people in the same place.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Is like, yes, Eve only runs 1 hertz, but we have 6,000 people. Most FPS servers run, you know, between 30 and 120, and have like 10 to 60 people in.
Exactly. I'm going to see if I can sort out the sound so we can actually have some sound.
So I don't know if anyone knows this yet. Does anyone know how many people are actually involved in this test? Like last time, it was very publicized. They were trying to get 10,000 people at once into the environment to test the theoreticals and the system out. Do we know how many people are involved in this iteration of the test?
There isn't actually a counter, like, on the actual on the, you know, because before they actually had an actual sort of counter saying this is how many, you know, how many clients are connected, etc., etc. I think they're trying to. Well, to be fair, I'm not entirely certain exactly what their goal is specifically.
They did say how many people had registered. That was the only number I heard, and that was on day 1. Cool, somebody's following. Thanks. All right, so I'm looking now. There's at least 5 or 6 people who are streaming this Aether Wars demo, including CCP itself on their channel. But you also have Marquis Dragon and ourselves, and Ryko also. Well, and then Rain and Pando is... Well, Pando is too. So anyway, there's a lot of people watching this in different channels.
Oh,
so
damn.
It might be over... Wow, did you get worked?
I had that classic Eve alert that my ship is in pretty dire straits. I'm probably going to die with the next missile that hits me. But... it's only because I can only see half of the actual screen controls this time.
Yeah.
I need to figure out which one is... Whoa. You see that?
And Raiden from Streamfleet is at, I believe... not CCP headquarters, I think. And he is streaming it with a representative from Aether. From Hadian, I think. His stream actually looks like it's high definition, so this must be high definition ready.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, goodbye.
So everyone knows that as the hull alarm. I nickname it the heart attack alarm because every single time you hear it, your heart instantly races.
Yep, that would be the. Has been used to great effects in Eve Radio and in various different podcasts and stuff. I'm trying to figure out what it is. Okay.
Oh, looks like Raiden is at Twitch headquarters, I think.
Oh wow. So shall we try a different ship?
Yep. Go big.
Let's try this. Let's try the healer.
You know, I have to say, like movies, high definition looks worse, if you can believe that, because it looks a lot less real. Because your mind has to fill in less blanks, and so then it becomes incumbent upon the technology to look realistic. And I'm looking at a high definition versus the more grainy version. The more grainy version actually looks better. This is not only true for video games, but also artwork. We did one of the posters that I worked on early in my career as a graphic designer for the film industry was Stigmata. And, you know, the first comp was very grainy and dark and moody. And MGM loved it. They were like, yeah, this is great. And then all artwork after it's designed has to be redesigned layer by layer in order to give it that kind of resolution it needs to be able to be blown up to 40 inches tall or even billboard size. And when you do that, you have to rebuild it all with high clarity. And a lot of the mood went away. And MGM's like, what the heck happened? You know, this used to be a lot more gritty. It's like, oh, it's just cleaner because of the resolution is cleaner. That was the only thing that really changed.
Yeah.
And I think that's because the mind will fill in the blanks. If you're reading a book, you have very little to go on except descriptions. And so your mind fills in all that imagery in your own, you know, with your own background and imagination. That's why books are really magical.
So I think there's a little bit of issues with the server right now. Either that or I'll need to restart my client. I'm not entirely certain.
Looks like you got stuck. There's that trail.
I'm stuck with no health in a petrol kind of twilight.
It looks like it's still going on other screens, so it might be.
Yeah, I think it might be me. I'm just going to restart my client. So, you know, be back in a sec.
Yeah, Caleb said it. Dirtier is better. Yeah, I would say grainier is better, but yeah, dirtier is better is good too. Well, this is cool. As he restarts, I want to go. We will eventually go back to. Let me unmute some people. Have an actual round table after this. After the interview is completely over, which will happen in about 30 minutes. Sorry, Elise, I had you muted there, but you're self-muted. Okay, at Talking in the Stations Discord, we have some people in this channel with us.
Can I just say that this shit looks amazing?
It does, right? The ambiance. I mean, you can
love it. It looks really engaging.
Yeah, you can feel the scale, and that's so important and missing from a lot of Eve's graphics because we zoom out. I mean, they've fixed the zoom here. We can't really zoom out, right? I haven't seen a zoom out.
I can zoom out a little bit, like.
Okay.
What I can see happening is the first iteration of like the Triglavian space at the moment. So in the conduits, that will be ported out into the main Eve client, and this sort of ambiance will become the new sort of backgrounds and effects you'd see in those Triglavian conduits going forward. Cross fingers.
I just think the gameplay also, right? The more twitchy, interactive gameplay might be just what Eve needs on smaller things, right? Not on big scale fights, but on smaller things, this kind of stuff would actually make it a lot of fun, more fun.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. And Elise, are you here? Are you able to talk? out here yet. Wonder what tournaments would be like here. I think they would be a lot more exciting, at least if you could switch cameras from different perspectives. But I'm not sure. Eve has always been a strange game that you need perspective. You need to be able to pull out, assess what's going on around you to make decisions. And if you're only seeing it from a close perspective, like you can in Triglavian areas, I wonder. They really have to find that balance, and I think they can. But it looks so good when a ship goes sweeping by, and you turn around just like McLeod did and start, being on its 6 or trying to follow it to shoot it. And that to me is like very arcadey, but it's also very exciting as actual gameplay.
Yeah, but like if you take the whole perspective thing, shifting from, well, if it was gradual, shifting from a mode of almost like a third-person shooter-like thing as we are now, and then to say a map or grid-like state to just orientate yourself and figure out what's actually going on, where do I have to go, and then with a proper mini radar thing, a bit like what we already have, but better, right? I think you could pretty much integrate something that has the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
It's just how do you get the mechanics shifted into this, right? All the ways that our modules work and all the features that we have in Eve, how would that port into a game like this?
Well, it seems to me this would be maybe specific to actually flying around and all the stuff that you do docked up, which is, half of the game is all the planning, and then is that a force field you have there?
Yeah, my shields, man. Gristas, remember?
All right. All that kind of stuff that you do in station and, in production lines and all that wouldn't be on this engine. I don't know. I think it would be pretty neat. I think it would be possibly more immersive. Certainly when you do the flybys. You can do this in Eve too, but it's so funny. It's just not as...
It's not necessary. That's the thing. Like a lot of the times when it comes to, how combat is done in Eve, it's about necessity and efficiency.
It's a lot of radar, basically. You're looking at your overview and making decisions based on your overview, doing all the targeting through either the fleet broadcast system or the overview. It's really flying by the numbers a lot of times.
Yeah, but not for the individual fleet member. Like the line member doesn't necessarily need to do that. They could be flying in this mode more than, say, the FC.
Right, but I wonder why don't people do that now anyway? Like, why wouldn't they do that? I think they need the situational awareness more than immersion.
Yeah, but movement doesn't have a benefit in Eve right now, right? Not to the extent of a shooter like this.
I mean, it does. I just think it's like calculated into the game for you, right? So if you hit orbit, it's like doing a cool little dogfight dodge, right? But you don't really know that. It just the tracking math does it for you, and you don't really see it.
Even a single change to the game would make you have to consider things like that. If you had some sort of occlusion for weapons based upon the objects in space, you would already have to start thinking about where you're positioning yourself.
Just avoidance, not even just occlusion, but avoidance. I'm going to say it, barrel roll, right? But something like that. Dogfight avoiding of your opponent would actually be interesting. We don't have that right now. It's all calculated onto tracking and things like that.
Well, remember Hilmar brought up the idea that the ships could be asymmetrical in terms of where their armor was. Mm-hmm. So it would make flanking meaningful, maybe.
Yeah, he said a lot of this technology would usher in new opportunities to design the game. And you're right, that would mean not only occlusion and evasion, but also putting all your shields in the front as opposed to your flank. that would invite flanking maneuvers, and then you could actually see formations, because formations would make sense, that you didn't want to line up so that you would shoot the guy in front of you. You want to shoot past him to the enemy. So all that kind of gameplay is not available in EVE Online, and this new technology might allow more of that sort of thing to come in. And then we're talking about really multiple new criteria inside of a strategic or tactical fight.
And we started talking about, or I was thinking that many of these things with mobile platforms and things like that, it almost makes it possible to play some sort of modular New Eden, right? Where each of your screens and pads or mobile phones can all have different information from different aspects of the same universe, right? You can pretty much be doing market stuff on one screen and have your pad show overview, and then do the full screen live third-person shooter-like interface. You can have all these things being part of the same world.
So my question to Elise and you guys is, this seems very, very applicable to the Alliance tournament type of gameplay.
It would make... Well, I just wanted to say, like, in terms of Alliance tournament stuff, right? Part of the allure of esports is like the WoW factor, and the sort of the ability of, like, not just individual piloting, but like the ability for, like, you know, sort of crazy moments to occur. And a lot of the gameplay, or just like the individual kind of like gameplay in EVE, is so calculated that, you know, once one person in the team kind of like, once a few of the dominoes start to fall on one side of the team, you kind of know what's going to happen. But, you know, when piloting ships and stuff like that become something akin to this, I can see it being a little bit more palatable for a lot more people when it comes to watching esports. If you get me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be, this type of thing would be a little bit more enjoyable to watch for, like, I'd say like the non-EVE player, because you could be like, oh, this guy just dodged that missile, or this guy just did this sick 360 shot thing, and that could be cool. Like for the casual fan, I think it would be much more interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Though, I mean, EVE is such a cerebral game, right? So the Alliance tournament is essentially, right, all it is right now, it's like 30% skill, 70% like theory crafting and how good your comp is.
And you don't really have easy access to the information. So even as a spectator sport, it's pretty difficult to know what exactly just happened, and you kind of need the intel, right? It's not easy to discern what's actually going on in tournaments. And
yeah, it is tricky. Though, like, this game does make me think that it would be really fun to have like a clone of Rocket League or something for EVE Online, because this does feel like kind of Rocket League to me.
Very popular.
It'd be neat to see. Yeah.
But it seems like it lends itself much better to streaming. Like you were saying, watching, like the person that doesn't play EVE, to be able to look at this and say, I understand, that's a ship. It's a spaceship. I can see what direction it's going because of the fuel trails or the engine trails. And I can see how big the objects are around it. Like, it's very understandable.
But it's also, if you combine these things, right, you get the benefits from real life sports, right, where you have the benefit of seeing something up close, but also seeing the entire field, right, and hearing the commentators talk about strategies and things like that. It would be a massive improvement to EVE tournaments.
I don't know. This is exactly why I play EVE Online. You see that guy in what looks like a rattlesnake just spinning around? That's exactly what I want to avoid. I call it the guy with swords dancing by the cantina. Like, I don't want to see that shit.
No, I get you there.
Okay, I'm cool now. I've come back down.
Why? Because I like a bit of that says back in my day you could only spin a ship in a station.
No, that's why I ran away to EVE Online after trying a whole bunch of different MMOs, as I was tired of being immersed in something and then having it broken by some goofball that put a macro on for dancing. I'm sorry. I just don't want to see that. If I'm reading a book, I don't want somebody to spoil it. If I'm watching a movie, I don't want somebody to spoil it. If I'm watching a movie, I don't want somebody to interrupt me. You know, like in a dine-in theater, that kind of stuff. Like, I actually want to stay in the moment. Who's with me? Okay.
I get your desire to sort of be immersed, but sometimes, I mean,
you know, see dancing in stations.
I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. Well, yeah, it has to be kind of arcadey. It's like a tech demo. It can't be like super realistic sim because it would take like 5 years to develop.
No, but the movements itself, I think these games lend themselves to being very arcadey because that's where we learned to do it. It looks great. I think it's very easy to grasp what's going on. I love that you can feel the scale on this thing.
Oh yeah.
Those are the plus. The other pluses are very technical. Can we get 10,000 people into a fight without worrying if it's going to get overrun? You know what I do like about this, and I think Triglavian Space does it very well, that this is the artwork is based on, but you get a sense of the space or an area being full. You know, even online, it feels very empty.
Yeah, the art in all of the Triglavian Space is like really beautiful, and it makes you feel like you're in this pocket, and it gets your palms a little bit sweaty when you get to the edge. You're like, oh shit, I'm actually gonna die. Like that type of feel. It does the Abyss Space makes it feel like you're in space doing stuff, and it's not like vast and empty and
right.
Or you're in a doom on the horizon, you know.
Right, or you're in a coral reef as compared to the open ocean the whole time. Like, you actually see texture and you can hide and you feel a little more. I think it engages those senses of I'm safer closer to this reef because I can hide from the bigger fish out there. And it plays on a lot of internal things, I think.
Let's just remember that actual real space is 99% empty.
I'll remember that and then quickly forget. Yeah, but
I cut someone else off. The thing is, Caleb, it may be 99% empty, but there is a lot of it. So there must be a lot of areas of space that's quite full.
Did somebody? I cut somebody off when I said that. Was that Lux or someone?
Not me. But a good metaphor would be a tide pool. Tide pools are microcosms that teem with life. They're right there on the cusp of the ocean.
Yes, exactly.
There was a section somewhere in this map where there was a Titan, so I'm trying to find it because that'd be a really cool way of like showcasing scale.
It's in one of those clouds in the cloud. I don't think it's a Titan though. I think it's just a structure.
No. It was a Ragnarok. I'm certain of it.
All right, welcome Bard Ghost Commander A, Zanara, and others who have joined us for the stick demo.
Yay!
Man, this whole time I thought I had to mine rocks, and it turns out it's the clouds. So I've been sitting around these rocks because they light up when you do the scan, right?
I know, they look like they shimmer and stuff, right? Yeah, they look like they shimmer and stuff.
That's what I need. So I've been just orbiting these rocks like a moron doing the same. In a rattlesnake.
I was doing the same.
It's just instinct, guys. It's what you're used to.
Well, that explains the guy who's trying to find the hack by putting his ship in the space cloud and just spinning it. Maybe he's trying to... Yeah. He's trying to min-max the game already.
That totally looks like a... Leviathan.
Well, there's incentive to do so, right? If you get on top of the leaderboard, you get a sick gaming PC from.
Actually, that was something that we should have said. Like, you know, if you're taking part in this, if you end up first place on the leaderboard, the competition is you win a Corsair gaming PC, which is awesome. Oh.
And you wasted a lot of your time.
And a trip to Vegas, right?
I wasted my entire time mining rocks that couldn't be mined.
The trip to Vegas is a random, like, it's basically they'll pick somebody at random, but the gaming PC is
First place.
First
No,
place.
that makes sense.
Totally. Look, see, I told you it was totally a Leviathan.
Was it?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Man.
Look at that.
I'm not used to seeing the Leviathan from so up close.
Let's see how big it looks. Get near it, do a strafe it, or go near it, whatever that's called. Do a flyby.
It kind of like looks destroyed.
I gotta say, I'm disappointed in the scale. It looks pretty small.
Yeah, it looks way too small.
That looks
Maybe
like
I'm going almost
like
1,000 meters a
miniatures.
second.
that looks
Almost
like
a
a
kilometer a
battleship.
second.
I don't think this fits with my Ships of Eve poster,
No.
scale-wise.
I think it's supposed to be this. Okay, so what we're flying is about the size of a semi or a bus. And
No. What we're flying is about the size of a commercial airline.
That's a cruiser, isn't it?
No.
Yeah, cruisers are about that.
We're
Frigates
flying
like
a-
one are about 40 meters.
Yeah, we're a frigate. So this frigate is only the size of a semi truck or a large bus. A little bit bigger than a bus. So that Leviathan should be the size of New York City. There's no way that's the size of New York City.
But we are also going at almost a kilometer a second.
Well,
It's supposed to be the size of Manhattan, right?
Yeah, get closer to that structure then and see how close you can get.
I started to bounce off it at some point.
Do a Star Wars move and crash on the bridge. Okay, so that's your closest point right there. I can see you bouncing off it. Yeah, that's nowhere near the size of Manhattan. That's probably the size of a carrier, or at the biggest. Maybe.
I dropped the scales thing in Twitch chat.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers for that.
So they'll have to get that right, or basically just say the Titans or all ships are smaller than you thought.
That's a lot of.
No, they gotta be bigger.
That environment is amazing. Look at that.
It's just Triglavian weirdness, right? It's because it's in the abyss.
It's a baby Leviathan. That's it.
It's just
It's the new it's a new abyss sort of effect. It's a 1.5 to 2 size reduction.
Because they're 20 kilometers long, right?
We all need to tell CCP that we thought their Titan was very cute.
So,
Baby Titans.
so
Can you see that actually?
Do we know how many people are on this?
It said a little while ago. Yeah. If you look at the effects when I go through here, you can actually see like some of the rocks bouncing off.
That's awesome.
But I think they're having trouble getting new people to log in. I think some people are having login issues.
Yeah, I can't get in.
Yeah.
I've heard a few others can.
I logged out and in, and now I'm in some Twilight Zone, or it's just me.
Yeah, I had that before.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to play badly on the competition aspect of this demo, right? People are going to feel it's unfair.
It's not unfair. Like it's, I'm fairly certain it's random. They're not picking people out and going, "You're not having a gaming PC." Like no, it's pretty much at random.
Well, I'm winning in my mirror zone because it's just me in it.
Maybe they're doing like what Rockstar did, right, with GTA. You cheated, so now you're in your own little kind of like world.
All right. So those gas clouds are what you're supposed to be mining to get through the mission, but the leaderboard is governed by how many you kill, how many other players you kill, I think.
No, so
I
you
have no
get
idea.
resources from the clouds, and then when you kill someone, you get a % of their resources. It's the person with the most resources at the end who wins.
Oh, that's great.
There are some people with 170,000 resources right now.
Whoa.
which are probably going to come out on top.
So it's vampiric. That's good.
Yeah, each of the ships has a % loss that you'll take whenever you lose it.
Right. Well, compared to the first demo, this is far more advanced.
Oh yeah, and it's far more stable as well. Like, we're not getting ridiculous amounts of pop-in, like, you know, things just popping in, and like before it was. Elise?
Oh, I was just gonna say, before it was like you had 2 buttons on your mouse and then 1 button on your keyboard, and that was basically it.
Yeah, and just hit rocket over and over and over.
It was literally just, you know, forward, backwards, and then fly around, and then like fire. That was pretty much it.
So how can you tell that some people have 170,000 of this resource you're supposed to get?
You hit tab, it'll show you the leaderboard.
Oh, okay. Hit tab, let's see.
Oh, I'm shooting Outstanding Vengeful right now, apparently.
Oh, so go ahead.
I found Manic Velocity.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it says I'm targeting Manic Velocity.
Oh, God. A few thousand
That's
AI
awesome.
connected clients are on their way. It's about to go down.
Long-time player, really good at EVE Online. The introduction of this kind of technology, what kind of ramifications would it have? Could it break the spell, the hook that has a lot of people addicted to EVE Online?
I mean, it would necessarily depend on how they implement it, you know? Like, if they did this tomorrow and they're like, okay, this is your new EVE Online, I'd be like, okay, so long. Yeah. The reason I play EVE is because it's a bit slower paced in terms of like clicking and stuff, and I also believe that's why the average player age is in their it's in the late 20s, early 30s now, right? Yeah. You don't necessarily have to be like a Twitch star in terms of like your reflexes in order to be successful. You can outthink your opponent instead of just click faster or better.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's one of the main draws of EVE, is the fact that like it's not just one game, it's a whole bunch of games. It's what you make of it.
And it's the aesthetic stuff too. Like if you press P, it changes the way your ship looks.
Being on the EVE client.
God damn it.
Or
I hate you so much.
Was that a self-destruct button? Did you just
That was
get
a self-destruct. Yes, he tricked me into self-destructing. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's the oldest joke on the fucking internet.
I mean, I expected like the old F4,
right? Let's clean up the language, please.
I expected the old
F4.
If you use Alt F4, it will bring the ship back.
Oh, no. I ain't falling for you twice.
I mean, it is so much more vague than Alt F4, though, to click P.
What about Alt H?
Nope, not doing it.
Okay,
I'm not doing it, man.
That was a very old joke. That was to hang up your phone.
Damn, that is...
Well, as I was saying with Elise, I don't think that you could just introduce this into EVE and say, like, done, we've upgraded it. They're going to be very careful about how they move into this.
But it would be more like the technology, not necessarily the gameplay, right? It would be like...
It's the underlying server tech.
Yeah, so it would be like, oh, EVE, but you can play it with 20,000 people, which would be a little bit harder to do with the Cyno changes, but, you know, it's possible.
You guys need to think bigger. They want people to adopt it. This is where we get Titan fuel from now on.
Well,
as I was saying when I was talking to...
That's why the Titans are here, dude.
When I was talking to Hilmar, I was quoting an article that was written, I forget the publication at the moment, but it's a gaming publication, entertainment publication, it's well known. And they were saying, in their interview with Hilmar, they asked him, how would you bring in this new technology? And he said, well, you could actually bring it into the story. So people who are in New Eden, who are all refugees or ancestors of refugees that were that came a long time ago, could actually have to do a journey of their own because New Eden is collapsing for whatever reason, and you would have to migrate out of the EVE Online that you know. And when you're doing that with storyline, you can put a lot of you can start to change technology as they move into a new area, and that way it's kind of masked with an RP reason for changing technology.
Yeah, I've always
like
thought
the no law was found argument, right?
I always thought the idea of like reopening the Eve Gate, like one day the Eve Gate just shoots right back open, and Capsuleer's like, I wonder what this is, then gets sucked in and goes somewhere new.
Isn't that what they did with Echoes? That the lore story behind Echoes is that an alternative universe appeared when Caroline's star exploded.
I have no idea, but that sounds cool. Like, yeah. I literally completely buy into that.
They have split it in the lore somehow. I just don't remember what they said. But it was something like that, right? Some event paths diverged.
It was an actual alternative universe. It said so from the interview that the German media did with CCP.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
trying to get this dude, but like, it's like we're fighting the same. It's like with the same ship with the same fit in like an abyssal PvP.
Well, since we're testing the underlying technologies, do we know yet how many players are in here? Actual players?
Last I heard was 3,000. But
about the same.
May have changed.
Well, they were adding a few thousand like clients as well.
Well, it would be interesting for a few reasons. One is we want to see how much this server technology can take before we break it. They need that information, and it would be nice for us to know too if it gets bogged down. But two, it'd be interesting to see how the incentives worked, right? Because this is an incentivized test, unlike the first test, which was completely volunteer. Because there was a lot of player wisdom out there saying you want people to show up, you got to give them something. So let's see if that's true.
I think the best part is I have a feeling none of those people showed up.
Right?
None of the people that were like, hey, we need something to show up actually showed up. So, maybe...
It was... Sorry, at least you finished.
Oh, no, that's it.
I was just going to say, it did seem very not hyped this time around until, like, the last few days.
But shouldn't they consider trying it as an almost all-day event and then just let the invites be spammed by the users when they're streaming it?
I don't know.
It just snowballs over the actual day. So like a 6 hours event, and you just see it get higher and higher and higher until it breaks.
I've kind of seen all of that I want to see. Like, I don't know how you do this all day.
Yeah, it does feel like you've done it for 10 minutes, you've done it for an hour, so. And there are 5 minutes remaining,
Okay, 5 minutes remaining. We'll go back to the Rise interview, and then we'll come back for a roundtable on where Eve is right now and this whole era of chaos.
Yep.
Well, I'm with Elise on a lot of his conclusions. The first being that this is something that... What is that harpy doing? Or that worm?
He's living his best life.
What a great expression. Living his best life.
That's pretty cool. I wish
that guy's too heavy on. He's using meds too much. I think he's too heavy on the stims there.
I think he's all coffeeed out. Living his best life. I've never heard that. That is hilarious.
Guy needs to cool off on the quaif.
Yeah.
All right, so it looks like 3,000 players. That's about the same as last time. I think there was about 3,330, I think. Or 3,300 last time, about the same this time.
I will say, last time I was way better in terms of like getting on the leaderboard, even though there wasn't a leaderboard. Like I had like 80 kills or something, and I felt way better
about yourself
compared to everyone else. This time I just sat at a rock for a while until I realized I had to go to the thing, and I died.
Fishing on the wrong hole.
Yeah, so I mean, I felt way more like a Dumbo on this one.
Well, we're laughing that is kind of Eve-esque, is to throw you in the deep end and let you figure it out, no instructions.
Yeah, that does actually remind me of my first time at Eve, so that's good.
Hey, so you did an interview with Manfred Sidious. Both you guys from Pandemic Legion talked about Pandemic Legion history the other day on Talking in Stations. That podcast is out. That was a part 1. Is there a part 2?
Yeah, there's a part 2 that I think we're doing this week. I'm not 100% sure.
Fantastic.
But I believe it's this Thursday, assuming Manny's still available, either that or maybe next Thursday. But yeah, we kind of like started going on, and we realized kind of about an hour into it that we're like, oh shit, we're not even past like 2009, so this might be hard to do.
Yeah, gonna need some more time. It's like, gonna need a bigger boat.
As a note, that YouTube video should be out today.
Great. We've had some technical challenges that have offlined the Wormhole show for 1 week, and we were not able to upload the PL history episode until now, so that's going up. You forget how hard it is to put this stuff together. We're working with people from all over the world, and technology that is somebody else's, and it's mostly all online. So to get all these programs to you and correctly branded and synopsized or summarized, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. Exon's a big part of that work now.
Yeah, he's doing sterling work on for us on YouTube, which is fantastic.
Many fronts, yeah.
Thanks.
And we hope to really take advantage of YouTube as well in the future, and to really develop that means of distribution, because it seems to be, it's grown for us. It's doubled in 1 season. It's now on its way to tripling on the 3rd season, so it's growing fast. Granted, it was small because we only had about 1,000 subscribers, but there's a lot of room to really explore EVE Online content, tell you what players are doing, but also tell you how to play the game. There's just a lot of room for, as you can see, visuals and conversation at the same time. So we'll check that out. Okay, we're rounding out. We've got about 2-3 minutes left on this test of server technology. We've got about 3,000 people playing on this thing.
I mean, it feels a hell of a lot more stable and playable as a game than the first one. It'll be interesting. Sorry?
I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, it's not a screen full of missiles like the last one was. So it'll be interesting to see like quite what this will turn out to be in terms of stats and stuff.
Right. It just seems like a lot of things are going on now. Oh, it looks like you're stuck there, but the last test, it was a lot of missiles, a lot of ships, and that was it. Yeah. A lot of artificial intelligence, and this one looks like there's a lot of structures, a lot of lighting going on that wasn't going on before, or that we could tell. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that might have been the end of the test, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just announced it in a ping in their Discord, but from what I can see, and there are a lot of people were having their, I think it's called ZPC, the points that you get for the leaderboard. Mm-hmm. They were getting them completely reset on every death. So people aren't quite happy.
Harsh. What is that like chaos era inside of Aether Wars? Like, was
the chaos has spread.
Yeah.
All right, so that looks like it's going to wrap up our coverage of Aether Wars by Hadean. They are a developer of large-scale, what do we call it? Large-scale server engines that allow many players to play at the same time in the same place. And that's something EVE Online could benefit from, and that's why this test is sponsored by EVE Online.
Matt, the term would be dynamic load balancing.
There we go.
That's what they call it.
Thank you. All right. We don't know the name of the winner yet, do we? There's a contest here to see.
I'm sure that'll get announced in due time.
Yeah. All right, well, we won't wait around for it. Is there anything else we need to talk about with this test, or can we go back to CCP Rise as he finishes the interview that we had with him on Thursday?
I wanted to make a bit of a joke of like, quick, you have to get to the other studio so we can carry on the interview.
Excuse me, I gotta go change my shirt.
Check on your white shirt so we can finish this interview.
I should have thought of that. That's great. All right, so let me jump back in with Rise. We've had him waiting this whole time.
All right.
Rise interview. We'll do a roundtable on how people feel about the chaos era. A little bit more time. Again, something you're really involved with is Triglavian ships. You really like where they're at.
I almost cut you off in the intro. I don't know. I am not doing the invasion PvE trig stuff, so I don't know too much about that. I know a lot about the Abyss and the trig player ships, but yeah, that wacky stuff going on in HiSec, I don't know too much about.
Do you have any new trig ships in the mix that you guys are working on? Any caps or anything? Caps, please, maybe.
Who knows?
I always thought...
Maybe it's another assault frigate with a range bonus.
Hey, I'll take it.
I always thought that you guys were, with the Triglavian stuff, it looked like you guys were trying to make another playable race, because you seem to be building out all the ships for it. It's so different from everything else.
Yeah, I really wanted to build out a deeper, like, full kind of racial line rather than a faction line. But actually, the part of it that hasn't been leveraged much yet is, rather than just a single extra race, we wanted just an envelope for several deeper faction lines. So we've only done Triglavian up to this point because it ended up being such a kind of great theme for a lot of the work we're doing. But the point really was to have a home for deeper lines of ships that are using new mechanics like the disintegrators. And there's tons of other ideas we have for new weapon mechanics and stuff along those lines that could also fit under that umbrella if we got the chance to work on it. So I hope we get to do that at some point.
That umbrella is called the precursor line of ships.
That's right, yeah. Yep.
Basically the ancient races ships, and this is the first racial line that you're doing on it.
Exactly.
So there are plans for more.
The plan was to make sure that there was a place for that, and we have sketches basically of mechanics and ideas we could use if we wanted to take that further, but there isn't like a plan to build out another faction right now.
You left yourself room to go in that direction. Okay.
Exactly.
The PvP arena is something that seems very, very much up your alley, right? You were from a PvP background when you were a player. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it needs a lot more work. Like, I think it was exciting to get to try something there and see what interest level was like and try a set of mechanics. But it was definitely something it felt more experimental. We included it because it sounded fun, but didn't pour tons of time into it. And I think it could be really awesome with a lot more time into it. The state of it right now is it's like got some really dedicated people who, there's leaderboards built on third-party sites and lots of really cool videos, people looking at different things they can do with that 1v1 meta, but it's also super exclusive. Since it's unfiltered, you can take in billions of ISK worth of stuff on the most tricked out possible ship to make sure you're competitive, which means there's only a few people who are really going to do it, which is a bit of an issue. I actually randomly have a small announcement about that, though. We discovered this week a really sneaky defect that was keeping the proving gates from spawning as often as they should. So I know a big issue that the guys that do really enjoy that feature, there's certain time zones where it's really hard to get the gate to spawn, and we found something that's causing that. So hopefully once we get that fixed, which
That's
it's hard
great
to
news.
say. Yeah, I know, it was really fun to hear, because it was a bit disappointing that like half the game was locked out of using it. But it's apparently not a super simple fix. It's got to do with like the way that the entire like room and travel mechanics work. Like that whole system has to be tweaked some, so it might not get fixed right away, but it's nice to know that at least hopefully somewhere pretty soon
more
people will have access to it.
And once you get it fixed,
once we get it fixed, they'll just be, the proving gate will be up more often.
Okay.
Like, so
That'll be great, because that was a big complaint that I heard from a lot of people, was that the gates were just not spawning anymore.
Yeah. If you haven't watched, there's a guy, Torvald Uruz or something. I don't know how to pronounce the name exactly, but he streams a bunch of this, and it's always sad. He's in a time zone where he's really excited to do it. So he runs some tier 3s, heads in, doesn't find a gate, does it a couple times, gives up, and goes back to doing tier 5s in the Gila. And he's hilarious. He's a great streamer. Recommend it. Checking him out. But I would love if he could get fights if he wants them. You know, that would definitely be a big improvement.
Yeah, I'll maybe roll up an alt and go fight him in disguise, just to give him something to do.
It.
Well, it would just be a slaughter, right?
Yep.
Okay, something else that you're very involved with, because this is interesting. You came to CCP in what, 2010 or 11?
No, 2013.
13. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, but you were a presence before that on Alliance Tournament. You were one of the commentators. You did that for a few years. You were also Kill 2. Somebody who was, we talked about it before the show, that's why I'm laughing, PvPer that did videos on YouTube. One of the ones that people referred to a lot.
I did videos on e-files before YouTube. All right. If you can imagine. Yeah, I've been around making dorky Eve content for a long time.
Okay, so you started playing Eve, and then what happened? You said like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. I think I should actually just record myself and explain what I'm doing because I want to share it.
Actually, no, I just loved videos. I actually got into Eve because of videos. I saw some videos of people holding other people ransom in low-sec. And, you know, these awesome, like, crappy, like, Creed in the background and someone like Megathron killing 6 people.
Yeah.
And I got really pumped, and that's what made me start playing. And then, so once I was playing, I just wanted to be part of that. It had a really awesome community. I mean, it still does, but it's changed a lot. I guess it's the streamer community now, but back then it was all, there was like I forget what it was even called, Eve Creations and something. It was like a content section of the official forums. And there was like a really, really cool group making videos and kind of trading ideas and stuff. And I got really into that. And so, yeah, originally just making those super old school things, then making YouTube stuff, then having a podcast, then live streaming a little bit before I got hired.
So Creed brought you into EVE Online.
Yeah, Noted. Pretty much.
Noted.
Pretty much. Thanks, Creed.
Oh, but that's interesting. So you got in through video and wanting to exchange, I don't know, techniques. Well, I always thought
it was such a unique. It still is, like you were saying with the heist article. Like it was my version of the heist article. It was just seeing people playing a game that worked so much differently than any game I'd played. That was so much about social autonomy, like getting to mix strategy and combat with like manipulating other people or having trust be important or having your friends be valuable. Like that was just so unique. I mean, I'd come from then playing a lot of EverQuest, which is great, but it, a lot more traditional. And I just, the sandbox thing, seeing it in a video and kind of having the hype element of that with the sandbox parts of it were pretty exciting. And yeah, just wanted to.
Right. You just lost some of your PvP cred. I thought you were going to say Counter-Strike, but okay. We'll give.
No. I'm terrible at video games. All right.
That's
good at making them terrible at playing.
I played some Bunker Command in StarCraft. Does that count? In like Brood War custom maps? Does that make
there you go? That's fair.
I think that you bring up a really good point about EVE Online. There's something special about it. I think that's why we're here. We're all intelligent. We're all very employable, and we're stuck on this game, right?
Well,
and part of that is like when I first saw EVE Online, they were
EVE players, good employees.
Yeah, there was this like they have a Linux client, and I was like, holy cow, they have a Linux client. There's something to this. It has a cachet beyond the actual game. It's almost like a lifestyle in that sense.
There are times when I worry about the fact that I'm friends with such a big nerd, Matterall.
Might not be the game for you, Brisc.
There you go, right?
Yeah, no, but yeah. There is something special and unique. I mean, it always feels to me like it's more of a, like you say, a lifestyle. It's more of the way you'd think of, and other games can do this too, and maybe a lot of them are moving this way, but a more traditional hobby. It's like more like being a golfer or something where you have like long-term relationships, you have like a lot of built-up investment, you have a lot more choice about how you engage with it. It's not the same for everyone that does it. It's super special.
Right. It's not the same for everybody that does it. And that must be an incredibly tough fact on you as a developer, because when you tweak something for one game style, it affects the other ones. And so,
yeah, that's how you end up with collateral damage t-shirts.
Yeah. And that inside joke. I
gotta figure out what we're going to put on the t-shirt this time to give to you. So,
Brisc, what was that inside joke about? So the people who don't know about it.
So last year when after the CSM summit, they introduced a bunch of changes, and one of the things that we were able to persuade them to do was work on the 500 MN hick exploit, or what I guess wasn't an exploit, but it was just a quirk of the way that it worked. And by fixing that, it broke it for wormholes. And Rise wrote out a dev blog and said, "This is collateral damage to the wormholers. We're sorry about that. We'll see what we can do." And they went nuts about being called collateral damage. So we put that on our open comms t-shirts for him, for everybody.
Yeah, and then gave me one in Vegas. I have it over here somewhere.
There you go.
But I said, yeah, and even said, I think that as is often the case, wormholers are collateral damage.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Oops.
So in the tradition of Blackout, ESI has been talked about recently. I guess basically the information from the game that you allow third-party users to create applications for people to see. One of those big ones is the kill board called the Z-Kill. And they basically decided to delay everything by 2 hours. 2 hours? And as an experiment, and it only lasted a weekend, and he actually put it back to the way it was. I don't know why. But the point was, it's really kind of up to you guys to say, if we want to delay perfect information, we need to do it at the source, because other people can just scrape it elsewhere. Any thoughts on you guys doing that as an additional way of making fog of war?
I mean, we're talking about that a lot. Fog of War specifically is kind of I know probably Hilmar was talking to you about that too. He's pretty pumped about that idea and taking away more perfect information. Probably great ways to do that, but this is also an area where, like, who's going to be better at compensating for not having perfect information on Z-Kill? Probably organized groups that have the structure to get their information fast, rather than the small groups who depend on the tools. So it's tough to find the right points, I guess, to make those changes. But the thing we're actually talking about more than just like delaying or deleting ESI components is just ways we can level. There's a big imbalance between the IT structures behind really big groups and the tools that smaller independent groups have. And so we're talking a lot about if there's things we can do to just balance that scale a little bit, either by building things into the client so that people who are lacking that infrastructure have kind of automatic access to the same information that the big groups are getting, or by taking away tools that we don't want anyone to have, things like you're saying, to delaying information or obscuring it in some way so that it's more level, even when the big groups do have the ability to do that IT work.
Or even, as our engineer McLeod points out, maybe less information on those kill men. Maybe you don't get the whole fit. Sure. We were talking in stations about this one day, and we're saying like, yeah, if you get a kill mail, maybe you have to salvage for it, and then you can figure out what somebody was flying. Then you can piece it together as a puzzle, later.
Yeah, maybe you can play like a really like slow mini game to unlock information to slowly hack your kill mails.
Oh God, you guys are killing me.
That sounds like a great way to employ new players. Actually,
yeah,
have a big room of paper pushing kill mail decryptors.
There you go.
On
exactly.
On those old
I'll have a whole group of summer associates doing all of that work for me.
No, but you know what? You need to find roles for new players to come in and want to fit in. Right now, the only role is to push that button, that F1 button, push it when I tell you to, and that's not a role. But if you say we need a scout or we need a Cyno guy, so if you can figure out how to do that. Yeah. Hey, we need a salvager. We need a salvager to go be able to do this, thing. The more roles you create, the more hooks people can have on their climb up to whatever it is they want to do. That's how I see it.
Yeah. We talked about Siegel we talked a lot about that when Siegel was around, like kind of jobs for newer players that enable, veterans to do cool stuff, but ones that don't feel condescending and crappy.
Right. The paperwork.
It's hard to find awesome versions of that, but I think there are some. We definitely want to poke at that some more. I really like the idea of having more than one person in a ship so that you can bring your noob along and have them do something cool in your ship, but not have to worry about how to position or move.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you kind of already have that through anchoring, but if you design for it more specifically, you could give them more to do, which would make it more fun.
I got it. You can nerf the bombers that way. You can have a bombardier. You'd be the guy
Totally.
that pushes the button.
Yeah, a guy aims the bomb, shows where to go, flies the bomb himself, and then gets calls back to the ship afterwards.
Oh no, one-way mission, man. They blow up with it. All right. Last thing. You said something that was... I feel like this whole era is your era, because one of the things that you wanted to do a long time ago was go into a harder mode. In fact, talking about what do you call it? Characters permadeath. Yeah, permadeath was one of the things you talked about.
Yeah, that's got a very very chaos era feel to it, doesn't it?
Sure. Is anything that evolved from that thinking like on the table too? Have you been bringing some of those old ideas out?
I mean, that as like a big high level idea, it always crops up like pretty consistently. It's always fun. One thing we haven't talked about when you were talking about sort of catalysts for putting us into this era, or like when the turning points were, something that's happened a couple times lately is pretty big changes to the leadership structure at the company. We have a fairly new design director, a fairly new creative director, monetization director. There's a lot of new people around, and that is always means some shift in strategy, and that has a big part of a lot to do with, I think, why we've entered this stage now is just the people we have are different and interested in different things. But on permadeath, it's always fun when there are new people in those positions and they come across permadeath. Everybody always gets excited. Like everyone's always like, is there a way we can make this
Alliance tournament? Make them gladiators.
Don't. You guys need to back off of that whole line of argument. I think it's a bad idea.
That was actually one of the strongest themes when we were thinking about not for the Alliance tournament, but that the justification or the sort of explanation for permadeath is that you could, as a capsuleer, have like an entertainment piece gladiator who you would have to, like, you would control but would be doing something in the EVE universe for your entertainment, basically. And that would why there'd be leaderboards and stuff like that, is because capsuleers like clapping as these gladiators run around and try to fight, but they're just mortals, and so it's very sad for them.
Very Amarian, isn't it?
Yeah,
I love that.
It'd be really fun. It's definitely not on a roadmap right now, but
that's what I want. When I was running for CSM, that's what I was wanting to inject back into, and I couldn't do it, but to influence you guys to inject that kind of big thinking back into the game. Very sci-fi stuff that has a little bit of novelty to it, but it's also nice to describe to people who don't play EVE, because that's kind of like, what an interesting game.
For sure. Yeah, that's and I think that does fit a lot with the kind of discussions and attitude we have right now. Yeah, is like another area that's I think ripe for the same kind of depth and exploration is kind of intel systems as a whole. Blackout is a pretty harsh binary change to a pretty shallow system, like Intel, both in terms of cloaking and in terms of like how local and scanning works, with the exception probably of probe scanning, is just kind of flat. And there's so much incredible sci-fi potential in that area, you know, having like submarine gameplay where you're like looking for people based on sound or heat, or having you know, even something, I mean, the old pos shield system with like manual codes that you could like steal from other people, very janky, but stuff like that where you're like you can get into someone else's stuff and steal things, and it's all based on a deeper intel system. There's all kinds of cool stuff we could do there, and that's the kind of, you know, we're much more ready to talk about that kind of thing now than we have been in a while.
Oh, that's awesome. And this is because you said earlier, and I think it's a big point, a leadership change or changes at the top. So it's also a huge change in your financing. You guys were bought by a bigger group out of Korea. And this allowed you to...
They told us to add the signer requirement.
Of course I did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they wanted that 35 cents of extra skill point.
Yeah. Those are rookie numbers.
But has that also emboldened you guys to look at the game differently? Has that had any influence at all yet?
Not much influence. They've been pretty hands-off so far. Mostly we're using them to get advice. They have, you know, or to compare systems. They have Black Desert, which I know some, you know, we have people who love it and people who don't, but they have a lot of experience. So we have some, like, I'm working on another feature right now where we have a shared channel where we can like compare notes basically on some of the ideas for it, but there's no like top down pressure. Often both of any of our Chinese partners and Pearl Abyss are really helpful for talking about NPE. They have a lot of experience working on NPE stuff, so they play it, they give us fresh eyes on a lot of that, and that's another area we get a lot of conversation from them. But it's not like heavy handed come in and do this. It's just trading ideas, basically.
Got it. All right, we're winding down here. This is the last question from me, and that is, it seems like the whole world revolves around all the stuff that we talk about at Talking to Stations, but you're doing a ton of work for new players, right?
There is a lot going on, yeah. Most of the majority of the dev team right now is working on new player focused stuff.
All right.
That's definitely the number one strategic goal, even though this, you know, Chaos Era is actually the non-stress medicine version of it is harder for veterans and easier for new players. And the easier for new players part is a big component. We're doing a lot of work to try and improve the early experience, because that's definitely our big Achilles heel as a game. We lose a lot of people early. You know, Berger talked about it.
And you worked on it too, right? In the past.
Yeah. I worked on it 3 or 4 years ago.
Rise, isn't there always a risk of making, you know, significant changes designed to bring new players in that have a tendency to get older players to back off or leave? I mean, isn't that always the big issue that everybody goes chasing off the new people, and you lose your whales and you lose your veteran players?
Probably I mean, I can see where that would be possible if we were making really deep changes to core systems. Like if we were making combat massively more simple in the mechanics so that new players could understand it. But most of the stuff that we're doing is a lot more about just translating the game better for new people so they can get their bearings and get excited about the game faster. Also, I think we've been probably indexed internally towards being too conservative when it comes to what you're talking about. A big example for me is the skills on demand, which has been a conversation that's come up, the idea of doing that off and on for several years. And when we started that conversation, I was like, I don't know, that seems too new player focused. Like there's people who make money off of trading skill books and things should be in the market, and it's kind of good that it's hard. That's like my gut reaction as an EVE player, but it's a great change. It's like just makes it a lot more like possible for a new player to function, and at no cost to veterans. Like, yeah, there's probably 4 people who are making money in Jita moving skill books 2 jumps, but that's a super small price to pay for a lot more accessibility. And I think most of the stuff we're looking at is either in that area, like that type of impact, or is more about translating, more about saying like, here's things you can do. Even though this game is a lot different than other things you played, here's what you might be interested in, and here's how to pursue that. And I don't know, last component of that is that the things we've seen the biggest results from are not even at this, they're not really even gameplay. They're like simple UX problems, things that just this morning we were talking about the bounty system and how new players get bounties on them. They don't know what they mean. They're scary. And so they leave. It's not like some massive problem, but it's like the issue is not that the bounty system's bad or that we like don't want new players to use it necessarily. It's just that it makes no sense to them. It takes too much. It's too deep sort of a system to quickly understand. And it communicates the wrong thing about what's happening when you get a bounty put on you. So let's fix that. Let's make it so that you can't put bounties on people in their first 7 days or whatever, or do a better job explaining what it means when they get one. And there's so much
just
stuff
tear the
like
whole
that.
thing out like we suggested at CSM 13. So
you could do that. But I think all of those examples are kind of, to your worry that it's going to casualize EVE to the point of veterans leaving. Like, we're so far from that level of change. We're talking about just making the game make sense to people.
Great. All right. Well, CCP Rise, thanks for sticking with us and telling us what some of these changes look like. Carneros and I was going to call you Brooks. Brisc, thanks.
That'll be my alt name.
Welcome to Docking Stations.
There you go. You mispronounced Brisc. How can you mispronounce Brisc? Oh, Matterall.
Hey, before we take off, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for all the feedback. We do read as much as we can. It's been really helpful. Catching stuff like the Cyno-Visual thing is really important. So I'm glad people are having the conversation. And
Thank you.
So thanks.
And I bet you didn't know where the Iceland unemployment office was until you got all that feedback. So.
I didn't. That was very helpful. Yeah. Thanks for tweeting me where the unemployment office is in case it all goes wrong.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We will see you next time on Talking in Station.